So out of winter into spring.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're live.
Well, it says we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's Tuesday, 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern, midnight in Dublin, 1 a.m. in Italy, 8:30, or is it 9:30 a.m. Wednesday morning in Australia?
It's 10 a.m.
10 a.m. Oh.
You were close.
And it's Facebook Live. And my very special guest today is my friend Trudy Scott. And we're going to talk about her upcoming events, her summit. But in the midst of all that, we're talking about brain function, anxiety, depression, brain function, those things that influence all of that. So thank you all for being here. And Trudy, welcome back. It's nice to see you again.
It's very nice to see you too. I'm so excited to be doing this and connecting with you and your community here. It's wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
You bet. So let's start a little bit with, tell us about the event, about your summit that's coming up.
So it's the Anxiety Summit 6. The theme number 6. Yep. It's all new material, new research. And the theme this year is talking about toxins, medications, and infections. So how various toxins like phthalates, like fluoride, like oxalates could actually be a trigger for anxiety. And then we talk about medications, and we're talking about psychiatric medications like benzodiazepines, SSRIs, antidepressants, and how their side effects can actually make anxiety worse. And then also options instead of having to resort to using medication. So looking at lifestyle, looking at nutrition, looking at various supplements. And then we also actually talk about non-psychiatric medications that can actually trigger anxiety. And interestingly enough, Accutane, which is commonly prescribed in teens and young adults for acne, can actually trigger psychosis, anxiety, depression. So we need to be aware of those and other medications that can trigger anxiety. And then the final area is infections and how you can actually have anxiety and depression as a result of an infection, say, for example, Lyme disease or one of the co-infections. So we need to consider all those underlying factors.
You know, Trudy, that's really remarkable that, so when I wrote the autoimmune fix in 2016, I talked about all of those mechanisms that you just mentioned as triggers to autoimmune diseases. And when I wrote the second book, You Can Fix Your Brain, I talked about those same triggers in terms of multiple types of brain dysfunction. So now we're seeing that you're taking those same areas, which are critically important that we all understand, and channeling it down how it may affect brain function and specifically anxiety. And we could do the same summit on depression or on bipolar or on schizophrenia because the mechanisms are the same. So it's really great to see, because for everyone that's out there, if you've experienced any anxiety yourself, or if you have a family member or a friend that experiences anxiety, this summit is for you for that reason, because maybe the delivery of this information through the ears of someone who has experienced anxiety will allow it to get in, empower them in such a way that they implement the lifestyle changes. And I just want to start off by saying, here's a woman, Trudy Scott, who walks her talk. Look what's over her right shoulder. Look at the plants over her right shoulder. And most of the people who follow me know I talk about plants absorb toxins and indoor air pollution. And so when you have two 6-inch plants in a 10 by 10 room, it absorbs over 70% of the toxins in the air. So I'm really happy to see your background. Some people use white screens, or green screens, and But this is a natural background, so thank you so much for that.
It's a pleasure. And I'm so glad, Dr. Tom, that you mentioned what you've written about in both your books, the autoimmune book and then also the brain book, because, you know, we could add to that Alzheimer's, we could add to that rheumatoid arthritis, which is obviously an autoimmune condition. But I think it's really important for people to realize that one trigger can cause one particular symptom in one person, maybe 2 or 3 symptoms in someone else, or maybe no symptoms in someone else. So we are all unique, and we have those triggers that can cause some of these symptoms. And being able to realize that this is possibly one of your root causes, I think is very, very powerful. So you can, as you say, identify it, recognize it, make the changes, and then see resolution of symptoms. So I'm really glad that you tied all that together there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to do a shout out. This is Facebook Live, so it's not like a standard interview. So we'll do some shout outs here. Val from Geneva, Switzerland, first one on today. Hi, Val. Thank you for being here. Dorada is from New York City. Debbie's in British Columbia. Ira's here from the Philippines. Karen's here from Maine. Donna's here from Prince Edward Island. Gwendolyn's here from Auckland, New Zealand. Thank you, guys. It's really great to see that the world's here. It's really nice to see that. Michelle's here, says hello from Michigan. Hope all's well with you and Marzi. Thanks, Michelle. Marzi's doing great. She was here just a minute ago, and you know she's got the Buddha belly right now. It's sticking right out there, and she's as happy as can be. So thank you for your good wishes. Lena's here from Canada. Let's see. Gwendolyn. The DRTOMOBRYANGLUTENFREE. So someone on the team is saying hi, Gwendolyn. Welcome. We love you in New Zealand. Nice. Sis is here from New York City. Read your book. Love it. Thank you, sis. Thank you. And Judy's here from Warrnambool, Australia. Does that sound right, Trudy? Warrnambool?
Maybe. I don't know.
Okay. Trudy's in Sydney, Australia right now. So it's 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning for her. And Sharon's here from Ontario. Angela's in Vegas. Emil's here from Turkey. Hello, Emil. Thank you for being here. It's late for you. Thank you so much. Trina is here from Australia. Amanda's in San Diego. Laura's here. Hey, Laura. From our staff. Laura coordinates my schedule, keeps me on track, and it's why I don't have pure white hair, is because Laura takes some of the stress off, right? So there's more and more, and I'll keep going in it. If you guys have questions on this topic of anxiety and brain function, and would like to ask Trudy, just send them in. We'll put them in the chat box, and we'll see them there. So Trudy, how is it that you got into this world about anxiety?
I got into this because I had my own anxiety. So in my late 30s, I was working in a corporate job, and I was under a lot of stress, working long hours, not getting enough sleep. And I started to get increasingly anxious, and I ended up having panic attacks. I developed social anxiety. I just remember that first panic attack, not knowing what it was, where it was coming from, and just not even knowing what a panic attack was until it happened, and being terrified. I couldn't breathe. I was hyperventilating. I said, I've got to get up some oxygen. I've got to get some oxygen. I can't breathe. And it was really terrifying. And I started to connect the dots by working with a wonderful nurse practitioner and a naturopathic doctor, and started realizing that what I was putting in my mouth was affecting how I was feeling. So I was eating gluten. That was a big factor for me. So I had to get off gluten. I was actually eating a vegetarian diet at the time, which did not suit me. I was eating a lot of processed soy, which was not a good idea. But then I discovered all of these toxins as well. I had a mouthful of amalgam, so I had mercury in my mouth. I had been exposed to lead, working in a oil refinery where I grew up in South Africa. And I also grew up in South Africa where we had leaded fuel. So I'd been exposed to all of that lead as well. So I had this, what I call this perfect storm of toxins. I had the lead, the mercury, the gluten, the the soy was damaging my gut. The gluten obviously was damaging my gut as well. And then I was going through perimenopause at the same time. So my hormones were changing. I was in my late 30s and my progesterone was low. And it turned out that I had, I discovered that I had really low GABA levels. GABA is an amino acid, gamma aminobutyric acid, which is your calming amino acid, calming neurotransmitter. And when I started to use GABA as a supplement, I got immediate relief from the anxiety and the panic attacks. And this gave me some hope and it gave me some relief and I felt calm. And then I could deal with all the other underlying causes, like I had to get off gluten. I had to heal my gut. I had to get rid of the mouthful of amalgams. That was a big deal, going in and having, what did I have? 16 or 18 amalgams replaced. That was a huge, huge deal. So, but what I've found over the years is that using amino acids have been amazing for me and my clients. But anyway, long story short is I worked with this naturopath and started to make these connections. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. I want to learn more about this. So she said to me, why don't you become a naturopathic doctor? And I said, well, I'm really interested in the food and the diet. She said, well, go to nutrition school. So I went to school to become a nutritionist. And now I've made it my mission to help other people who get anxious to find solutions quickly, because it took me a number of years to get the answers. And, over the years, different things have changed. Recently, 5 years ago, I discovered I have a chronic Lyme infection. So I know that is a factor now in my health, but things are going to change as you get older. I went into menopause, so my hormones changed again. So there's all these factors that we need to think about, but having the foundations of good nutrition and knowing that toxins and infections and these other factors could be factors in my anxiety has just made a huge difference. So long story short is, I'm doing great. No longer have the anxiety and the panic attacks, but I've got to stay on top of things. I've got to look, keep on top of my diet. I've got to make sure that I'm living a lifestyle that is free of toxins as possible. And then if things come up, like discovering a Lyme infection, you've got to deal with it, so it isn't going to make things worse again.
You are modeling the journey. I guess we could call it the hero's journey. There is that term in mythology, the hero's journey, about finding your self, your authentic inner self. But the hero's health journey is first identifying what mess you've got in your body as an individual. And it's overwhelming to, just see, well, I got this, I have these amalgams, these silver fillings in my mouth, and I've got food sensitivities, and I've been eating soy because I'm a vegetarian, and gluten because I'm a vegetarian, and that was causing more problems. And then, I had this, and my microbiome was way, and you start learning all of this stuff. You feel like Rosanna Dana, who was a character, the first group of Saturday Night Live characters was John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, Gilda Radner, and Gilda Radner had a character called Rosanna Dana. And she would, you should go on YouTube, everyone, later, not now, but go on YouTube and just type in Rosanna Dana and watch a skit of hers. And she said, my nose runs, my ears itch, I got BO, my head itches, I got lice. And she's just laughing with her about all the things that are going on. And that's the way people feel when they start diving into, why have I been diagnosed with ... anxiety or rheumatoid arthritis or MS. And as you start looking into it, and we come from the training, we were reared to believe that there's one thing wrong and you take one pill and you're better. Now, that was true to some degree in the 1950s. That was true. But what's happened in the last 70 years, never before in the history of humanity, and I'm sure Trudy's going to talk about this a lot with the people that she interviews, is the amount of environmental chemicals that humans are exposed to today. Every newborn child's got, the most recent study I've seen says 280 chemicals in the umbilical cord blood at birth, 280 chemicals that are not supposed to be there. And many of them are brain toxins. So never in history have we had to deal with this. So Trudy, in the guests, the practitioners and the researchers that you're interviewing, have you interviewed a couple of them that talk about detoxification pathways and what seems to help with anxiety?
Yes, we absolutely have. But before I talk about that, I just wanted to mention this paper. I mean, I'm really glad you talk about these exposures to toxins, because in our interview, right at the start of our interview, Dr. Tom, I shared this paper that was published just this year, 2020, a scoping review of non-occupational exposures to environmental pollutants and adult depression, anxiety, and suicide. So they are talking about common things that we are exposed to. This isn't, you know, someone having a mouthful of amalgams. This is someone who's exposed to air pollution, secondhand smoke, noise, pesticides, solvents. So this is, you know, chemicals in your home. This is living in a city with a lot of air pollution. This is being exposed to things like wood burning smoke from an internal fire in your home, smoke from a forest fire. All of these things can actually trigger anxiety and depression. And they actually, in this paper, they're actually saying increase your risk of suicide. So I'm glad you asked the question about detox, because even if you haven't been exposed to something obvious that you may think, like I was exposed to lead and mercury, just being exposed to these chemicals and pollutants on a day-to-day basis is something that we need to be aware of, and how it can impact us. It could be, as Dr. Tom said, it could be triggering an autoimmune condition. It could be triggering anxiety. It could be a factor for Alzheimer's. But being aware that we are exposed to these pollutants all the time, and then focusing on detox on an ongoing basis. It shouldn't be a thing that I just do, you know, once or twice a year. We should be focusing on detox on an ongoing basis, because we are exposed to so many toxins. And as you say, Dr. Tom, things have changed so much in the last 50, 100 years. We're just exposed to so much. When you think about, you know, just someone with their cosmetics, their shampoo, their moisturizers, how many, people are exposed to phthalates and these xenobiotics that can change your hormones. So we are exposed to a lot, and we definitely need to be thinking about ways that we can detox. You know, we talk about sauna, we talk about red light therapy, we talk about simple things like dry skin brushing, eating foods to support our detox pathways, like leafy green vegetables and bitter greens and bitter foods to support bile production. Bile is so important. We've got to have good bile production in order to digest our fats, but also to carry those toxins out of the body. So there's so many ways that we can think about to support detox. And interestingly enough, I want to bring it back to GABA, because that's my passion, is sharing about how powerful the amino acids are. But GABA, used as a supplement, is actually amazing for certain toxins. There's a number of studies that show that fluoride, which is something that we would get in our water. We may not realize that we're also exposed to fluoride when we're drinking a lot of kombucha, because it's made with tea, and tea is naturally high in fluoride. So there's a study talking about GABA and how GABA can reverse fluoride-induced hypothyroidism. So fluoride can actually affect the thyroid. It can lower the production of thyroid hormone. But there's a number of animal studies that show that using GABA can eliminate the anxiety that's caused by fluoride toxicity, and can reverse all the markers of underactive thyroid that has been caused by fluoride. So, and then at the same time, it's giving you some anxiety relief as well. So it's pretty interesting to think that, using these detox methods and then using something like GABA can have benefits as well.
You bet. Trudy, I'm going to ask you, if you would, to type in the chat room the chat box the name of that study that you just referenced that was published this year. And while you're doing that, I'm going, so there everyone can see the study. And I'm going to read a couple of questions here. And before I read the question, so everyone knows, there are many, many benefits to GABA, as Trudy's talking about, and you're going to learn a lot more on her summit about that. And that you've heard me say many times that the controls, who's got their hands on the steering wheel of your brain function, is the microbiome in your gut. That for every message coming from the brain, going down, telling the gut what to do, there are 9 messages from the gut going up, telling the brain what to do. And what those messages are, it's the exhaust of the bacteria in your gut. That's called the metabolites, but geek term, but it's just exhaust of the bacteria. You know, like when you exercise, you get lactic acid and you're sore, that's exhaust from your muscles. Your bacteria has exhaust in your gut, and it's the exhaust of the family of Bacteroides bacteria in your gut that stimulate the production of more GABA. So you may need to take some GABA for a while because you're low in GABA, but the question is, why am I low in GABA? And that would be because of your microbiome. So you always are thinking also about treating the gut when you're taking a supplement like GABA, which is a great supplement. So Marzi just came in and gave me the note. It's like the hook, you know? And so the note says, questions in Zoom chat. Thank you, honey. So the first question is from Catherine. Thanks so much for all that the two of you do. Wondering how you define anxiety. I know it seems like a super basic, really good question. But I've been told by doctors I have anxiety, but I don't think I do, and that the doctors seem more interested in giving me a label under which they can dismiss my various health issues. Appreciate your thoughts. Trudy, how would you respond to that?
Well, it can vary for different people. I'll describe what it felt like for me, and then I'll give you some other examples of some feedback that I get from some of my clients. But for me, I just had this feeling of impending doom. I would wake in the early hours and I would feel like something was going to happen. I had this feeling like there was going to be some disaster, I was going to die, something was going to happen. And there was no trauma in my life. There was no reason I would feel like this. And there was nothing that I could pinpoint that was making me feel like that. So that was one of my big things. And then I was I was fearful of everything. And I had this, I had low GABA anxiety. So I had this physical tension. So I could feel it in my neck and my shoulders. So there's different types of anxiety that can be triggered by various different root causes. So for me, it was low GABA. So GABA really helped me. So I had the physical tension. I had that feeling of butterflies in my stomach. So I would feel discomfort in my stomach. And, a lot of people will say, I've got butterflies in my stomach. You may feel that. You may actually feel pain as well in the stomach. So often kids who have anxiety, they can't articulate that they're anxious, but they may say, I've got a sore tummy. And that could be anxiety because they don't actually have the word for anxiety. I also had low serotonin anxiety. So that was another trigger for mine. And with low serotonin anxiety, the way it manifested in me is I'd have this sort of negative self-talk. I would sort of think, well, I'm not good enough. Who am I to be doing this? A lack of confidence. And then insomnia. So with me, it was, I wasn't sleeping well. And when I was, did sleep, I would wake up not feeling refreshed, or I'd wake a lot in the night. And then for me, I would have the actual panic attack. So I would have the hyperventilating. So I couldn't breathe. I also actually had a lump in my throat at one stage. It's called pharyngeus, globus pharyngis, and it's a lump in your throat, and it actually felt like I had a golf ball in my throat. And I remember actually going to the mirror and looking in the mirror to see if there was something there, because it felt like there was this huge golf ball feeling in my throat, and if I swallowed, I was going to choke, but if I didn't swallow, I was going to choke. So that you can actually have that physical manifestation of the anxiety. And I actually talk about this in the interview with Dr. Eva Detko, because we talk about the vagus nerve and how important the vagus nerve is for everything. It's important for digestion. It's important for brain function. It innervates, all of our organs. And since then, I've had some vagus nerve issues, and Eva Detko in our interview talked about how this lump in your throat can actually be tied to vagus nerve function. So addressing that is really important. But so those are the symptoms that I had. Some people will have actual phobias. They will be afraid of flying. They'll have problems with driving. They may have fear of spiders. The phobias are typical with low serotonin type of anxiety. And then, we talked about gluten earlier and how that can be a trigger, but gluten damaging the gut can actually affect your absorption of nutrients, as you know from Dr. Tom and all of his teachings. But the gluten can actually lower serotonin levels. So you've always got to go upstream. And I know, Dr. Tom, you always talk about this. We're looking at low GABA and low serotonin in the work that I do, but you've got to go upstream and say what you said earlier. Why is it low in the first place? Is it the microbiome, as you just said? Is it the gluten that's damaging the gut, that it's affecting your absorption of nutrients, and it can affect your absorption of iron and zinc? And those are nutrients that are needed to make our neurotransmitters. So while the amino acids give you quick relief, you've still got to go upstream and figure out what that trigger is. So so let me just see who asked this question. This was Catherine. I hope this helped you sort of figure out if you may actually have anxiety. I find it surprising that a doctor would say you've got anxiety when you don't feel like you have it. But, there are some people who don't relate to the word anxiety. They just feel tense, or they might feel worried, or they might feel, anger issues. Anger issues can actually be related to low serotonin as well. So if you've got anger and irritability, that could be related to low serotonin. So hopefully that helped clarify a little bit for you and anyone else who's listening, what anxiety can look like. For most people, they know they have anxiety. It's very obvious that they've got anxiety. So, let us know what you think.
I'm going to focus on one aspect of what Catherine asked, and that is, how would you define anxiety? And Catherine, the way that I would say it is that if you notice that your outlook on life is thwarting your joy, if you find that you're looking at something and you just can't relax around this guy, or you're driving down the road in that car, they're driving weird. And if you just notice that how you're seeing the world is keeping you from having joy and peace, and you can't take a deep breath, we all should be able to just take a deep breath at any time, right? So as Trudy was talking about it, when she recognized what was going on for her, it was life-changing to recognize it and then do the deep dive into the literature and start learning all of the possible triggers and what type she had. It was life-changing. For some people, the dimmer switch that's affect and manifesting as anxiety, so maybe for Trudy, it was up pretty bright and it was really affecting her life and she couldn't breathe. And some people may have the dimmer switch just up a little bit and it won't be as bad. So it's not black or white, that you can't function, you can't breathe. Oh no, I can breathe, so I guess I don't have anxiety. I think that if you notice the way that you're looking at life and you're reacting to things quite regularly, you may want to just explore this summit and just listen to some of the talks, and what they're saying about anxiety, because it may be, you'll hear it from one person out of the, how many guests do you have on the summit?
35.
Out of 35 guests, and not that you'll listen to all of them, but you may just tune into the one and you really resonate with how that person talks. That's the one. You say, oh, I get it now. I understand. That's the value of these kind of talks. So I'm going to do a shout out here to Rajin, R-E-J-I-N. Rajin's in the Philippines. Hello, Rajin. Thank you for joining us. Venetia's in Australia. Vicky's in Redlands, California. Sis said, try to get on your Zoom, but got the message stating invalid address. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us on Facebook. I'm glad you found a way. Maggie's in Cleveland. Judy says, haha, it was close. Okay. Amal says, so great to have many ways to get your teaching. Hi from Santa Monica. Hi, Amal. Thanks so much. Lucia is here from Tucson. Fiona's here, says, hello, hola, Dr. Tom and Trudy. Fiona's on our team. She's in Mexico. Hello, Fiona. Mia Jones is here from North Wales, and the list goes on. And Shaquilo has a question. Can EMDR help? Now, EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And Trudy, would you like to take this question?
Sure. It's something that comes up in the summit. Dr. Eva Detko, actually, in the interview on the vagus nerve, talks about EMDR. We have Alex Ortner in the UK. He talks about EMDR. And this is definitely something that would be helpful if you've been exposed to trauma. It's a wonderful way to address the trauma in conjunction with all the nutritional support and removing the toxins and addressing some of those underlying factors, because if you've got to address the underlying trauma as well as addressing the nutritional deficiency. So yes, it's wonderful. And there's also emotional freedom technique, EFT, or tapping. And Alex Ortner is on the summit, and he talks extensively about EFT, using that in addition to EMDR. We actually talk about a study that where they used a combination of EMDR and EFT in survivors from the 9/11 accident in New York, and one of the firefighters who'd been exposed to very, very high levels of pollutants as a result of the 9/11 incident, and they used EFT and EMDR with this gentleman and saw amazing results. And he had been battling from this toxin exposure and anxiety and PTSD type symptoms for 15 years, and then the EMDR and the EFT helped him tremendously. So absolutely.
Marvelous, marvelous. And Trudy's answers are so comprehensive, because she doesn't just say, yeah, EMDR is really helpful. She says, yeah, it's helpful. And you got to deal with the nutritional deficiencies and the environmental toxins and the mold and the bacteria and rebuild the gut, because that's the only way you can deal with any of these chronic conditions, is to do the legwork of every piece of the puzzle that you can unwind. And we all would like to say, please tell me the magic pill or the magic exercise that will fix it. And of course, EMDR can be helpful. Of course, EFT can be helpful. Of course, going gluten-free can be helpful. But if you've got a chronic strep infection in your body, and you're gluten-free, and you did EMDR, and you did EFT, and I'm gluten-free, I'm dairy-free, but you've got chronic strep in your body, you're still going to be sick, right? So you have to peel all the layers off the onion. That's what functional medicine is. And there's so many great practitioners now that do that.
Yes, and Dr. Tom, I've got a lot of colleagues who are therapists, psychologists, and they use therapy, they use EMDR, they use tapping with their patients and clients. But they say when you do that, it makes the nutritional work more effective. And then you can look at it from the other angle. The nutritional interventions are going to be, the nutritional interventions are going to be more effective if you're dealing with that underlying trauma, and then vice versa. If you address those underlying nutritional deficiencies like low serotonin, low GABA, low zinc, healing the gut, it's going to make the trauma work more effective as well. So it's just this combination that we have to bring together. And I'm glad you mentioned strep, because we have Dr. Lisa Song on the summit talking about chronic strep strep infection and how this can trigger PANDAS, which is an autoimmune condition that can lead to OCD type symptoms and anxiety, and it's very common in kids. So it's one of the infections that we need to consider. Did your child suddenly start getting anxious and develop these very severe obsessive compulsive behaviors? And then, that's a time that we need to think about looking at PANDAS, and it's not well recognized in the medical community. So often you've got to be your own advocate for PANDAS and figure out if it is that. And I'm just going to give the name, or what PANDAS stands for: Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorders Associated with Streptococcal Infections. And it can be triggered by strep, as Dr. Tom just said, but it can be triggered by other types of infections as well. And you've got to get to the root cause in order to address these types of symptoms that can happen in children and actually in adults as well. So I just wanted to mention that was a really, really good interview that we did with Dr. Lisa Song.
Elisa is very good at this. She knows it well.
She does.
All of you have actually, most of you have done some preventive measures for strep infections. You didn't even know it. When the dentist gives you antibiotics before they work in your mouth, there's only one reason why they do that. You've got over 800 different families of bacteria in your mouth, including strep. A couple different kinds of strep is very, very common, but usually they're in small numbers because the good guys outnumber them dramatically. But when the dentist is working in your mouth and they squirt some water in your mouth and you lean over and spit out the water in the porcelain bowl, and it's red water or pink water, that's blood, right? A little bit of blood. He just gave you leaky gums. And when he gives you leaky gums, it takes 2 to 3 days, sometimes 4 days, for the gums to heal and seal against your teeth. So what happens is that strep can get in through the leaky gums into the bloodstream. And if it gets in through the bloodstream and it starts to set up shop and grow in your body, then your immune system says, whoa, what's this? I better fight this. And you make antibodies to strep. That's a good thing. That protects us. The problem is that the antibodies, they're special forces. They've got high-powered rifles, and they're just looking for strep everywhere in the bloodstream. Now, the bloodstream's just a highway. There's no lanes of traffic. Everything's bouncing around in there. And how does the antibodies know to attack that strep bacteria and not something else? Because the strep is wearing an orange vest, and it's a protein signature. And the antibodies have been trained to attack orange vests. That orange vest, that protein signature, looks a whole lot like the valves of your heart. So the antibodies to strep can attack the valves of your heart. That's rheumatic fever, and that'll kill you. So the dentist gives you antibiotics prophylactically, so that when they're working your mouth and they give you leaky gums for 3 to 4 days, it's going to take before it heals. If any strep gets in your bloodstream because you got leaky gums, then the antibiotics are already in the bloodstream. So if anything, they kill it right away, so that bacteria can't grow and stimulate your immune system, trying to protect you, that then has to go after the strep. And then the term is molecular mimicry, that the antibodies for strep look like the orange vest is the same or very similar on the valves of your heart. And it's also very similar to the tissue in your brain. That's where PANDAS comes from. It's a molecular mimicry, your body trying to protect you, fighting against strep. And so many of these kids that get diagnosed with PANDAS, they had a mild infection 2 weeks ago, or they had a fever for one night, and then they were fine, and the parents forgot about it because the kid's fine. Well, they weren't fine. the fever kind of took care of enough of the strep that was growing in your child's body that they didn't get sick anymore, but there was still strep around. And so your immune system made antibodies. And if your child's genetic vulnerability is to brain tissue, the orange vest that the antibodies can go after is in your brain. That's molecular mimicry. That's where most autoimmune diseases come from also. So great answer, Trudy. And so you out there listening to this, you could explain that to your doctor, because they can't tell you why the dentists give you antibiotics. They don't know what, well, no, they should know what molecular mimicry is, but they don't tie the two together. They just say, well, if the dentist says it, then it's probably a good thing to do.
It's so interesting that you're talking about mouth health, because in one of the interviews, I share some papers also from 2020 talking about pathogens in the mouth and how they can trigger neuropsychiatric health issues. There's more and more research showing that the oral biome, the microbiome in our mouth, can be related to mental health issues. So we've got to make sure that we keep our mouth health in good shape. And so I'm so glad you talked about this. It's really, really important that we make this connection, because there's a lot of research now on heart disease and the health of our mouth, and we need to start realizing that it's, this could be a root cause, one of the root causes of your anxiety as well. So there's just so many areas we need to consider.
That's exactly right. That's why we talk about in taking care of the health of your mouth, use Dentalcidin. Mary Agnes will post the link for Dentalcidin here. It's a healthy toothpaste that kills bad bacteria. And then after you brush your teeth, there it is right there. Right
we talk about it on the summit. So I'm so glad you brought it up. I love it.
That's great. And after you've used Dentalcidin, then you use the Dentalcidin pump. And you put a couple squirts in your mouth, swish it around for a minute, then spit it in the bowl, right? And so Marzi and I do that every night to maintain healthier oral microbiome. Another thing that I've never really talked about before, but I just remembered it now. One of the things I love to do, and unfortunately I can't do it here in Costa Rica because I can't find them, is have an umeboshi plum every once in a while. Umeboshi plums are kind of bitter and salty, but you put one in your mouth, it's got a hard seed in the center of it, and you just kind of chew on the meat a little bit and then let the seed sit in your mouth for an hour or two. I use it like chewing gum. Sometimes I would just have an umeboshi pit in my mouth, and it's great to support your microbiome. It's excellent for that. Okay, next question is from Barbara. Can you talk about mold toxicity? And so Trudy, what have you seen, or what your guests on the summit, is there anyone talking about mold toxicity?
Yes, we have Dr. Dr. Margaret Christensen. She does an entire interview on mold toxicity.
She's a good friend and part of the faculty of IFM, and Margaret knows about mold.
She certainly does. She's experienced it firsthand. Her and her whole family were exposed to toxic mold. It was a definite trigger for anxiety and a lot of mental health issues in her family. Her one son had severe psychosis from mold toxicity. He's still struggling from mold toxicity and some of the downstream ramifications. And it's definitely something that we need to consider when it comes to mycotoxins as being a root cause for anxiety. There's not as much research in the literature, certainly not going back 5 or 10 years as we would like to see, but there is more and more research showing that there is this we're starting to see the research, but certainly clinically, I'm sure you've seen this a lot, Dr. Tom, it's a huge issue. It definitely needs to be addressed. It often goes hand in hand with Lyme co-infections, chronic infections that just go on and on and on. And, when I'm working with clients, we start with the foundational work, which is addressing the gut, addressing the diet, addressing low levels of serotonin and low levels of GABA by using these amino acids. So you're getting relief while you're addressing all these underlying root causes. But if we're not seeing resolution of symptoms with the foundational work, that's when we start looking deeper. Is there Lyme disease? Is there some kind of other chronic infection? And is there mold toxicity? And then we need to definitely address that. The good news is the amino acids will give some relief. I actually share a case study in one of my interviews of a colleague of mine who had mold toxicity. She had anxiety. She had the panic attacks. She was going, ending up in the ER because she had such severe panic attacks. And she reached out to me, and I said to her, I would consider getting on some GABA and see if that can help. And she got on GABA as an amino acid, taking it as a supplement, and it gave her some relief. So now she didn't feel so overwhelmed. She wasn't having these panic attacks. And now she could work with a practitioner to help figure out how to heal from the mold toxicity, how to remediate your home. A lot of people who have been exposed to mold need to, they can sometimes remediate their home and get rid of the mold in their home, but others lose their homes, they lose their books, they lose their photographs, they lose so many things. And I've found that DPA, which is an amino acid as well, D-phenylalanine, helps with that emotional feeling, that weepiness, that feeling of loss that you get when you lose all your possessions. What DPA does is it destroys the enzyme that breaks down endorphins, and in essence leads to higher levels of endorphins. And anyone who's had an endorphin rush from someone giving them a hug or someone doing a good deed, or when they do a good deed, they know that feeling of endorphins where you feel joy. You mentioned joy earlier, Dr. Tom, when you've got that feeling of joy. And when you use an amino acid like DPA, it can restore your endorphin levels to such an extent that you start to feel that joy again, and you feel less emotionally vulnerable. So what I do in the summit is my expertise and my passion is the amino acids, as you've probably guessed. I connect the dots with all of these things, with the toxins, with the infections, with the medications, and see how we can use amino acids to offer some relief quickly while we're dealing with all these other underlying
Quickly
factors.
and safely.
And
Quickly
safely.
and safely, yes. They're much safer than the pharmaceuticals. Much safer.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Allison,
you mentioned earlier this when someone asked about the anxiety and you said that feeling of joy, we want to be feeling our absolute best all the time. Too many of us tolerate not feeling our absolute best, and you want to feel joyful. You want to bounce out of bed and you want to feel great. And, we tolerate the stress. We tolerate not feeling our best. We often, women tend to be caretakers, taking care of our families before we take care of ourselves. And if any of what we're talking about today is resonating with you, make sure you take care of you. It's really important, to take care of you so you can feel joyful and you can feel happy and you can feel calm every single day. It really is so
absolutely,
important.
absolutely. That's really the goal. That is a goal here.
Yeah.
Allison said, "Oh my God, I was just reaching for an umeboshi plum ball from Eden Foods, laughing out loud." And Allison, I lived in Ann Arbor, and I was there when Eden Foods opened. They were you had to walk down an alley to get in, and this little health food store and a little restaurant, well, kind of a stand. And Eden Foods now is a multinational corporation. It's huge. But I was there at the beginning with them, and I've been doing umeboshis all ever since then. Unfortunately, not for the last year and a half being in Italy. Well, in Italy, I brought them from the US. When I'd go lecture in the US, I'd buy a couple boxes, little packs of umeboshi plums. Eden Foods is the ones that I've always bought. I've never bought any others. Somebody asked about the paste. Is umeboshi paste as good? Well, the whole food is, in general, always more comprehensive than a concentrate. In general, that's true for most everything. But there are a number of studies on umeboshi paste and as an anti-inflammatory and antibacterial. So, and as a prebiotic. So umeboshi paste is going to be of value. I think some of you know, I've said this before, I was a baker in a health food restaurant. It was the competition to Eden's. Eden's opened up and you get to walk down the alley, and a block away was our restaurant, the Indian Summer. And I was making 48 loaves of bread a day by hand. And the salad dressing, we had an umeboshi plum salad dressing. And so we got umeboshi plums in 5-gallon buckets. And we go through it in about a month or so. So I've always been around umeboshis, and it's an acquired taste. They're a bit on the startling side, but I think they're so good for your microbiome that it's worth considering.
And there's actually in some of the articles on these umeboshi plums, it talks about GABA. Believe it or not, they contain obviously the polyphenols and antioxidants as well. But they talk about how the fruit contains all of these amino acids. And one of the articles actually says that the studies indicate that GABA, an amino acid that serves as a neurotransmitter, calming neurotransmitter within the central nervous system, may be produced from the glutamine that is found in these umeboshi plums. So isn't that interesting?
Yes. Ira has a question. Would diffusing essential oils and burning sage, the one used in space cleaning, help in dealing with anxiety? Or is it adding to the toxicity of the environment? Really good question. Trudy, do you want to take that?
Yes, I absolutely love essential oils, and there's so much research now on essential oils, and they can actually change physiology. There's lavender essential oil, which is amazing for supporting GABA levels, helping with serotonin production, and you've got that beautiful aroma, so you're feeling good right away. So I'm a big fan of essential oils. They do need to be good quality. You need to make sure they are actually essential oils. You can, if they're really cheap and you're buying them in the supermarket, they're probably synthetic. And something that we talk about a lot on the summit is fragrance, artificial fragrance, which is a phthalate, spelled PHTHALATE, which are very, very toxic. So you do want to make sure that you've got good quality essential oils. There's, lavender, there's the citrus oils, orange, lemon, neroli are all amazing for anxiety. I don't know about sage. I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about Dr. Tom. Sage is essential oil, is amazing, but I'm just wondering about the sage burning. If we've got to be worried about the chemicals that might be emitted from the actual burning. Do you think that's an issue that we need to be worried about?
Really good question, Trudy. And the answer is the indigenous tribes have been burning sage as a purifying ritual for hundreds and hundreds of years, but they're always outside. And so if you've got a sage stick and you're smudging someone to take off the negative energy, it's outside. And so you get a little inhalation, but then it's gone. If you're in a room and you have a group and you're smudging everyone with sage, you're going to be smelling it for an hour or two, and that's toxic. So I have no concerns about being smudged, purified with a sage stick outside, but indoors, it's not a good idea. In my opinion, not a good idea.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. Yeah. And then making sure you've got something that hasn't been contaminated with maybe some other, that it's the real deal. I think that's really important as well.
Gwendolyn says, Dr. Tom, thank you for the advice you gave me a few weeks ago about my new bed frame. I made the wood polish recipe. We have recipes for you guys on healthy, clean products to clean your windows, to clean your floors, to clean your furniture. And I bought an air purifier. I've also put a peace lily in my bedroom. Way to go, Gwendolyn. That's the kind of stuff that you do, and it takes a while to do those things, but once it's done, it's done. You now have a polish for the wood in your house that you'll use the rest of your life because it's simple to make on your own, and it's safe for you. And you've got an air purifier now, so you and your family are breathing better air. Way to go. Judy asks, what if it is not possible to take bile salts, no gallbladder? Trudy, did you talk about not being able to take bile salts?
We do. Can you just repeat the question again?
What if it is not possible to take bile salts, no gallbladder? I'm confused by the question because I
Yeah.
give bile salts if you don't have a gallbladder.
I would definitely give bile salts or use other ways to improve bile production, even if you don't have a gallbladder. The problem if you don't have a gallbladder, you don't have a place to store the bile, but you still want the bile production to be happening. So, yeah.
Right. And that question was from Judy. And Judy, your liver makes bile. It just makes a minor amount of it, and it goes down into the storage pouch, as Trudy was saying, the gallbladder. And then when you eat something that's got fats in it, the inside lining of your gut makes this hormone called cholecystokinin. Cholecystokinin then goes to the gallbladder and says, we got this much fat here, and so I need about this much bile. Then the gallbladder constricts. So the cholecystokinin is a messenger that gets the gallbladder to squeeze just a little bit, squeeze out some of the stored bile, and then it comes down to digest the fats. It's a beautiful system. Now, if you have a sensitivity to wheat, gluten, or any other part of wheat, you reduce your cholecystokinin levels by a minimum of 50%, meaning you eat a certain amount of fat, but you don't make enough of the messenger to say, I've got this amount of fat right now. And so your gallbladder it doesn't get the message or the instruction to squeeze out enough bile. So you don't squeeze out enough bile, and the bile stays here. So you get, according to Mayo Clinic, the way they said it in their article, and I remember this article really well, they say increased gallbladder volume, reduced gallbladder emptying, because you don't push it out. That's how you get stones. And so many times a sensitivity to wheat can be the trigger that sets up the eventual gallbladder problem. Now, if you don't have a gallbladder, you aren't going to secrete enough bile to break down your fats. It's not possible. Your liver doesn't make that much at any one time. So you have to take some measures to help your body break down fats, to produce as much bile as you can. Make sure you have good liver function so you get some being secreted, and you take some extra digestive enzymes when you're eating meals with fat, which is just about every meal you eat. But you have to, or else you develop fat soluble vitamin deficiencies because you're not breaking down your fat. So you don't get the vitamin A in your food or in your vitamins. You don't get the vitamin D, the vitamin E, the vitamin K, or it's greatly reduced. So if you've had your gallbladder out, you need to really dial down, and you're not going to get it in 5 minutes listening to this. You need to spend some time. It's going to take you a couple of hours over the course of a few weeks to learn more. Okay, I've got this deficit right now. I don't have a gallbladder anymore. And they said I'm fine without it, but I understand that I'm not. I just don't get sick immediately. So you want to compensate for that, but you have to learn how to do it. Trudy, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yes, I think it's so important to, first be aware of it and then do something about it. And I wanted to add something to this because we talk about oxalates being an issue. Julie Matthews, we have 2 interviews with her talking about dietary oxalates, and you've got to have good bile production, and you've got to have be able to be breaking down the fats that you eat in order to reduce the impacts of dietary oxalates. And if you've got high levels of oxalates, if you've got an issue with dietary oxalates, you could have anxiety, you could have pain issues, you could have bladder issues. So having good bile production is definitely important for that aspect. And then I just wanted to go back to something that you mentioned a second ago, Dr. Tom. You mentioned someone from a prior call saying that she's got a peace lily in her room. I just want to mention that peace lilies came up in the interview, in the oxalates interview. They do contain calcium oxalate crystals, and they are very toxic for cats. So just be aware that if you have a cat in your home, having a peace lily is probably not the best choice of plant to have. So just be aware of that.
I didn't know that. Peace lily is one of the plants that was identified in the NASA articles to absorb toxins. So I would assume that's why she has that, but that's good to know about the cats.
Yeah, yeah.
Really good to know.
Yeah.
Genevieve asks, how can we give GABA and DPA to children 7 years old?
So with children, I always focus on diet first. We've got to, a lot of times we hear about the amino acids and how amazing they are, and they truly are amazing because you get relief within 5 minutes of using them typically if you have low levels of GABA or low levels of the endorphins. And a lot of people hear this and they just want to jump straight to using the amino acids. And it's something that I do with my clients from day one because it is giving you relief right away. But when it comes to kids, I always go to food first. So I'm making sure that they are eating real whole foods. They're getting quality protein. They are getting protein at breakfast time. I've had a lot of, 7-year-olds with focus issues, with anxiety issues, with acting out. And it's because they're not getting a good breakfast. So they're not getting that protein at breakfast and they're getting these blood sugar swings, which are causing some of these mood problems. So we always focus on a diet, getting off gluten. That's a key thing for everyone that I work with, addressing the gut as well. And then we start thinking about the amino acids. That being said, I've had success with GABA. With children as young as 7. Usually, I work with moms, and they will use the amino acids and get a feel for how they work, and then they will use them with their children. So they feel comfortable doing that. For someone else who's maybe totally new to the amino acids, I would make sure that you become educated and informed about how to use them before just jumping in, or work with a practitioner who can help you. But certainly using very, very small doses of the amino acids are fine to use with children, but you've got to be addressing the foundational stuff first.
Really good answer. Very complete. Thank you. Well, everyone, it's already been an hour. I mean, it's hard to believe that. It goes so fast. It goes so fast.
We've had a great time, Dr. Tom. It's been fabulous.
I agree. So the links are here to register for Trudy's event. Everybody just register. You may not have time to listen to 3 of them. You may not, but at least the one you listen to may make the difference in your life, right? So you don't have to commit to listen to 35 different interviews when you register. That's the important thing to understand about summits like this. And you'll be called, and excuse me, I'll get a little airy-fairy here. Your angels are going to guide you to listen to what's important for you, right? But register for the event. There's no charge, and let's support Trudy so that she can continue doing this great work in the world. Anytime I'm asked about anxiety, the first person I recommend people look to follow and learn more is Trudy Scott. As she said, this is her 6th anxiety summit that she's been doing this longer than most everyone out there. I think, Trudy, you jumped on the bandwagon pretty quick after the gluten summit. I mean, you went to it really quickly. That was we did the gluten summit in October of 2013. When was your first anxiety summit?
It was the very next year.
Yeah, exactly.
And I remember telling you that you set the bar so high for the gluten summit. It was way up here. So I had something that I really had to live up to. And
that's really
thank
great.
you for your kind words. It means a lot coming from you, Dr. Tom. And vice versa. Anytime I ever talk about gluten, you always come up. So I really appreciate you being on the summit. And for everyone who's signing up, definitely listen to Dr. Tom's interview. If you're going to listen to 3, definitely listen to his. It's always great. Your interviews are always so well received by my community. So thanks very much for everything that you do, Dr. Tom.
It's really great. All right, everyone. Love you. See you next week. Same time, same place. Good night.